All right, welcome back to the Broken Dealer Podcast. I'm Daren Blonski, your host with my co-host, Carmine Corino. Carmine, we got a show today, and what are we going to talk about?
We have a show. We're going to talk about the biggest fears that we've heard from advisors looking to take that leap out of those constrained environments to the fantastic world of independence.
Okay, so now these the fears that people feel, there's a lot of them, and fear, I think, is the number one challenge people have to get through in order to effectively go independent. Because let's be real and honest, there's a lot of fear involved in this game, and if you don't feel it, then something's wrong with you. So it's just part of the game. So you have to work through that fear, and those who process through that fear emotionally and manage it emotionally end up being really successful, typically, as an independent advisor. So let's do fear number one, Carmine. What's fear number one?
So I would say probably the biggest one. No, not in any order. Let's see. Just the first one is...
This is just the first one to mind.
Drop of income.
So drop of income. So let's talk through this. So my income's going to go down, but I think that one's closely linked with my clients won't follow me, right? Because that's another big fear, right?
That's number two. Yeah.
So drop in income typically is not the case. Typically you will make more money doing less work as you go independent. Now, I can't speak specifically for anyone listening to this, their particular book of business, but typically what happens when you go independent is you get rid of some clients that you didn't want, you lose some clients you did want, but you keep a whole lot you liked, and there's a lot you have to do while you're in a brokerage that you don't have to do when you're independent, because a lot of the things you do as a broker are set up so that the brokerage is protected from broker behavior. So I've noticed with people I've worked with in going independent that is one of the biggest things that they realize after they become independent. They go, wow, I didn't realize how much of my day I was spending doing things to satisfy brokerage-driven requirements to protect the brokerage from me, the advisor.
Good point.
So what typically happens when you transition is, I always tell people, you're going to have 5 to 10 clients who don't come with you that you thought for sure would. And then you'll have 5 to 10 clients who come with you that you thought wouldn't. And it will, as long as you're a good human and you treat people right and do the right by the client as your first priority, whether or not you're on a broker chassis or an independent chassis, you're generally going to get pretty good retention if you play the game right. Now, saying that, there's a way to leave firms and there's a way not to leave firms. There's a lot of legal pit holes that we really can't get into on this show, but you should have a qualified attorney that knows what they're doing and knows how to leave correctly. Because if you think that you won't need an attorney and you skimp on that is not what you want to skimp on in this process.
You do not. Take my word for it. So hire an attorney to have your agreement. That's fear number 3, is the legal ramifications. But going back to income real quick, what I've heard was the transition time, I'm not going to be getting paid. I got to make sure I have enough money set aside for that. And then, what I have found, and I'm sure, Darren, you have found, when we do an analysis, the financial analysis for a potential advisor, we always find a revenue delta per dollar invested on our platform versus their dollar invested elsewhere, where they're getting a raise here. Because we don't have all of those underlying costs that the larger BDRAs have or the insurance companies have. But if they're only taking 90% of their book, 10% loss rev, does the positive delta and the other 90 make up for the 10? Usually it does. Every book is different. I can't say for sure. In our case, every advisor's here seeing the 10 to 20+% positive of per dollar of AUM invested. And we just did a transition 2 months ago, and by day number 9, that advisor had 44% of her book of business over on our platform. So we're getting really good at that process. Technology's helping a lot. All the custodians are definitely stepping up their game with transition time. So if the fear is I can't go 2 to 3 months without income, if you're diligent in that process in the beginning, you shouldn't have it. Now, actually, we haven't had anyone in the 5 years we've been extracting that had that kind of lag in income. So I think the income fears can be curtailed. They'll never go away, but could be curtailed by doing some due diligence. And if you're talking to a firm, have them do some kind of analysis. Okay, if your book moves here, this is what it looks like. And this is a usual transition time when money comes over to the time it's invested, how our billing works. So we bill monthly in arrears. So every advisor gets paid every month, so that we can map that out exactly how, hey, the first month you may have 50% of your book bill, but by month 2, you'll be good. Just get some clarity. At least knowing, I think, would dispel some of those fears. The legal part, the second one, like that, to Daren's point, this is not a how, let's reference who, not how again, like we always do, but this is clearly a who. Getting a qualified attorney to review your agreement. In fact, find an attorney who's dealt with extractions from your firm before. They already know the processes and procedures potentially and can give you some insight. You do that. Go ahead, Daren. Sorry.
Well, and I was going to say there's this little thing called protocol, right? So the firms got together many years ago and created this thing called protocol. And protocol is this idea that if advisors, when they leave, if they follow a certain set of rules, that will not have to sue each other when advisors move. Not all firms are part of protocol. Some of the biggest ones are not part of protocol in person. So what they've effectively done is created a molasses process and a very difficult process for people to understand on, I don't want to work here anymore and I would like to leave. How do I leave? And unfortunately, you can't be super transparent. Good independent firms will make that process pretty transparent, but you have to follow the process. If you're not going to follow the process, then it doesn't work. And that's why, Carm, I think your advice is so sound. Find an attorney that knows the firm you're leaving and understands that firm's process, because not every firm is the same. And there's certain hot buttons for different firms that you need to be aware of before you leave. And so having a good attorney that can help you navigate that is absolutely critical.
Well, some of the things that we've seen legally that have happened, these kind of worst case scenarios, is something like what happened with me. And if you read our book, I go into detail what happened, but I don't want that to be anyone to read that to say, well, that's going to happen to me. That was a very specific event. That was personal. I had a separate agreement with the company, so it gave them a little more latitude. But it was, as the dust settles, it was not a big deal at all. In fact, I wouldn't change a thing because I had the opportunity to avoid that kind of conflict, and I didn't, and I wouldn't do it again if given the chance. 2, we've seen TROs issued, or I've heard stories about temporary restraining orders issued. They're usually they're upheld for a short period of time once a court appearance is given, and normally that's for the bigger firms to kind of get a leg up in calling your clients. Gives them a little bit of time. Kind of pauses the advisor to be able to contact anyone and gives the bigger firm a leg up. In fact, Daren, your older firm, they used to fly in someone, right, to call your clients if somebody were to resign. They had a kind of specialty team that specialized in retention.
Yeah.
But be very, and I think one of the best things to do is talk to someone who left. We all, when I was at the insurance company, and Daren, when you were at the brokerage, we knew people left before us. They're probably the best source of information on what to do and, more importantly, what not to do.
Yeah. I'd say a general thing, and this would be a blanket piece of advice that, I certainly think applies to any situation. And when I see, and I've worked with advisors over the years leaving, the ones who are kind of arrogant and think they're, what doesn't stink, and are just super overconfident, those are always the ones that end up in trouble. They're the ones that end up getting a lawsuit on them. And if I could make any pleading for anyone looking to go independent, it's find your humility, for goodness sakes. Like, I promise you don't understand this game. And I promise you, winning this game is not getting sued. It's not winning the lawsuit. Because even if you're dead right, you already lost if you get sued. And that's just reality, because it's going to cost you money, period. So open up your checkbook. So being humble about it and not embarrassing the firms you leave, not making it seem like you're, sticking it to the big guy. All those things is what's going to help you be successful in transition. And your attitude is the biggest thing I can say to change. you're not that special, and they've dealt with people like you before, and they know how to deal with people like you, and they have whole hired teams that deal with people like you. So eat humility. And I heard this, and I think I might have used this in a previous episode, but an advisor I transitioned years ago to another firm, he had this analogy. He's like, when you're in a big firm, it's like your hand's in this bucket of water. And when you leave the firm, you need to pull your hand out gently and move it away from the bucket and try to not create ripples in the bucket, and the water will just fill back in, because that big bureaucracy, the last thing you should do is embarrass the bureaucracy, because bureaucracies don't like to be embarrassed. And if you embarrass them, they might even just sue you to prove their point. They might have zero case, but they'll come after you and you still lost.
Well, that's my case, right? So I found out after the fact that, what had happened is I wound up settling a week before arbitration. It was cheaper to settle than it was to go to arbitration. Fine. It was a business decision. I wanted my day in court so much, but my attorney at the time, she said, hey, as much as your check's clear, you need to make a business decision. It doesn't make sense for us to do this for a week. And so you pay me to sit there for a week and sit in the room with these people. You're better off writing the check and settle. But I wanted my day in court. But I found that after the fact that my settlement didn't even cover their expenses. So they were a net loss. Why did they do it? They wanted that story. They wanted to tell the next person that said, hey, I'm thinking about going independent. Oh, look what we did to Carmine. Oh, we bankrupted him and blah, blah, blah. They wanted that story. It's an expensive story, but they don't have a story, because I did not survive. I thrived because of that event. And, there isn't whenever I think about it, that's all I can focus on. Yes, it took money, but more importantly, to Daren's point, get your checkbook, but it owned space in my head for a good year and a half. That was the bigger loss. I'll waste money before I ever waste time. And that was elevator music that played at building this firm, and dealing with that at the same time was a distraction. The moment I wrote that check, it was like I put this 60-pound rucksack down that I decided to carry for a year and a half. It was a great time. But just make sure you go into eyes wide open and just put into perspective, worst case scenario is this, and fill in the blank. And if you're okay with it, if you can endure through worst case scenario, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah. And so it creates a lot of fear, right? And, one thing I tried to do long ago is just realize that, attorneys are just a tool in business, right? And when lawsuits happen, it gets very emotional and people get really upset. And ideally, in a perfect world, we could just gentleman to gentleman or woman to woman have a conversation about, here's what needs to happen, here's what we're doing. But when you start dealing with dishonest actors and people that aren't honest, but just manipulative and trying to nickel and dime and deceive, then you pretty much have to start using the law, and you have to use lawyers, because that's a mechanism to create trust when there is no trust. And that's what the functionality of law is, in a sense, right? And so I think if you can step back from the emotional drudgery of being involved with lawyers and talking to lawyers, and you'll do a lot better for yourself. But certainly take the time to find a great lawyer. The other thing you can do is there's really great transition experts out there. There's people that absolutely know this game. They do it all the day long, whether that's a firm like Carm's or a firm like mine. You can absolutely find someone that will teach you the path to going independent. They will help you do it. They will help you set it up. They will structure it for you. It will cost you money, but they will help you, and in the end, hopefully save you stress, time, and money. So know that there's different professionals. So you should, if you're not going to bolt on to a firm like ours, what you should do is have someone who knows transitions, have the attorney who will have someone who knows the transitions, and have the administrative support to help you with that. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make in transitions is they just resign and they just start calling their client 1, 2, 3 at a time over a period of multiple weeks. The longer you take to transition, the more opportunity that individual has to find a new advisor, whether it's the firm you're at or, hey, the guy down the street's been asking for their business for a long time, so maybe I'll give him a shot because this guy's not on it. And I'm not sure what's going on. So I think you need to make sure you have those right professionals in your corner, which will really help with the fear aspect of this. Another thing that I hear a lot, Carmine, is the fear of my firm protects me from the regulators. I hear that all the time. And I saw it championed in the firm I was in. It was like, we protect you and we keep you safe. And it was just right out in front constantly. And then I got out and I realized how much of the stuff they were keeping me safe from was keeping them safe from me. And I was like, wait a sec, how's that work? I'm paying you to keep you safe from me. And because so much of the things you do inside a big bureaucracy are to keep the bureaucracy intact.
I have a great story about that. And this insurance company touted that they would protect us. And that's one of the benefits of being with us. And, you should never leave and, all that good stuff. There's an advisor I'm close with, and this person inherited a client, and they needed a service form to move the money from a SEP to a 401k or something along those lines. I don't remember, but it was moving it from one account to another. She inherited this client, did not do any business, did not make any revenue off this client, inherited, got assigned to her. She called her staff called the service center, got the form needed that the service center had sent, got the client to sign it, sent it in for processing, thought it was done. Months and months and months later, client complaint comes through. Transfer was never done. She called up the service center. They pulled the recorded lines. They had an email trail, the whole nine. The service center sent the form, the wrong form. Client signed the wrong form. The advisor submitted the wrong form, not knowing. The firm never got back to them to tell them it was a wrong form. The transfer was never processed. This client was in cash and lost growth in the market. The client sued. And the firm's response to the advisor was, this is going to be disclosure. We're hitting your E&O. It was your responsibility to check the validity of the form that we sent you. And they had recorded phone calls that the firm admitted it was their fault, that they sent the wrong form, and they never notified her when they received it. Didn't matter. And this person's been in the industry 25 years, never had as much as a client complaint before. And now the record is blemished because of the mistake that the firm made, not the advisor.
So let's talk about that real quick. Carm, what's the impact if your record is blemished?
Well, if you're looking to leave and go to another firm, there's going to be firms, you have any disclosures, they're not interested. It's a risk, heightened risk. If you go on your own, I believe it may be an issue with E&O potentially. But if you're a client, or better yet, if a client's advisor, because this person deals with very high net worth individuals, they usually have a team of advisors. If this advisor is being courted as an option, where are they going to get background information on this advisor? They see this on the blemish on the record, it could potentially lose business for that person. So it is a big deal because it is public record.
Again, going back to why you should have proper legal advice,
yes.
Because you need to make sure that you're doing it right so you don't get a blemish on your record, because that will mitigate your ability to function as an independent advisor. So I think that's a great way to end it, Carm. I think it's be very, very careful. You should feel fearful, but not let fear stop you, because you will feel fear. But if you have the right team in your corner and you're getting the good advice, whether it's from an independent firm, an attorney, a transition expert, you can do this and you can be successful being an independent advisor. And I can truthfully say I've not for 1 minute regretted my choice to go independent, even when it got tough, because being able to be the master of your own ship, being able to guide and direct how you serve your clients in an authentic and in a way of integrity is a really powerful place to be. So Carm, we're going to have to leave it there for this episode of the Broken Dealer podcast. Thanks. Hopefully that was helpful for those who listened. And we want to hear from you. Reach out, smash the like button. Let us know what you want to hear about. And we'll be back on the next episode. Take care.
See you then.
Thank you for listening to Broken Dealer. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.brokendealer.com. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Carmine Corino and Daren Blonski. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Fermata Advisors, LLC, DBA Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group are both independent registered investment advisors and are non-affiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Daren Blonski and Carmine Corino on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Sonoma Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Cornerstone Planning Group. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. The information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.